You used to be called smart, gifted, exceptional. You were praised for always being right, for being ahead, for being the one who will go far. You grew up thinking that your value came from being better, being more, being perfect. Every mistake was a threat. Every failure felt like shame. So you tried harder. You overachieved. You became addicted to approval. But then, life started. Grades disappeared. Rewards stopped. The world stopped clapping. Now you just feel lost. You question yourself every day. What happened to me? I used to be someone. The truth is, you're not failing. You're awakening. Let's go back and understand what really happened to you. From a young age, you learned one thing. Being smart gets you love, praise, safety. But that praise wasn't for who you were. It was for what you produced. Your grades, your clever answers, your ability to impress adults. You learned early, if you're smart, you're safe. If you're right, you're valuable. So you made it your mission to never be wrong, to always win. But deep down, you started fearing challenges. You only chose what you were already good at. You avoided growth opportunities because they came with the risk of failure. You didn't develop resilience. You developed perfectionism. You didn't explore your identity. You performed it. You crafted a mask of competence, always smiling, always knowing, always achieving. But the mask became heavy. It isolated you. When real life came, with its complexity, its uncertainty, its uncontrollable variables, your identity cracked. Because without applause, who were you? Without validation, did you even exist? The illusion of being smart taught you to survive, not to live. And that was the beginning of the collapse. There was a time you felt unstoppable, energized, focused, endlessly capable. You could pull all-nighters, meet deadlines, help everyone, and still push for more. Exhaustion wasn't a warning, it was a badge of honor. If you were tired, it meant you were working hard. And if you were working hard, you were still worthy. But something shifted. First, it was subtle, forgetting simple things, zoning out mid-conversation, rereading sentences that wouldn't stick. Then it grew heavier. Sleep didn't restore you. Tasks felt like mountains. You woke up drained, your spark flickering, your motivation nowhere to be found. And when you couldn't keep up anymore, shame crept in. You're lazy. You've lost your edge. You're letting everyone down. Burnout isn't just fatigue, it's identity loss. If your entire self-worth was built on being capable and productive, what happens when you no longer are? You don't just feel tired. You feel broken. You isolate, not out of pride, but fear. Fear that others will see your unraveling and confirm your worst thought, that you failed. But here's the truth. Burnout doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've carried too much, for too long, without enough care or pause. It's a system failure built on a lie we learned young. You are only lovable when you are achieving. Especially if you were once the gifted kid, praised for being smart, responsible, exceptional, you likely tied your worth to outcomes. Rest became weakness. I can't became shameful. You kept going even when your inner self screamed for space to breathe. Even now in collapse, you resist rest because you fear that without your productivity, you'll disappear. That without doing, there is no you. But burnout isn't the end. It's a message, a rupture that says, I can't carry this version of me anymore, not like this, not alone. You've worn the mask of competence for so long it's fused to your skin. But now the cracks are showing. And maybe that's not failure. Maybe that's truth trying to breathe. You were never meant to be a machine. Not everything about you can be scheduled, measured, or optimized. You have needs, limits, emotions that spreadsheets can't hold. What if the exhaustion isn't a flaw, but a signpost? What if the version of you that can't push anymore is the most honest part you've met in years? Maybe this breakdown is an invitation to shed the roles, to rest without guilt, to be seen not for your output, but simply for being here. Let the collapse come. Let the mask fall. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally brave enough to stop pretending. From the moment you showed potential, the world began measuring you. Not by your joy or curiosity, but by how well you performed. Praise came when you achieved, when you produced, when you made others proud. And so, without even realizing it, you began to believe, if I'm doing something valuable, then I am valuable. That belief followed you everywhere. Into school, where grades define your worth, into work, where output replaced identity, into relationships, where being useful felt like the only way to belong. Slowly, rest became suspicious. Stillness became guilt. A slow day felt like failure. If you weren't producing, achieving, contributing, what were you even doing? You never questioned it. Everyone seemed to live the same way, busy, efficient, always performing. Your to-do list never ended. And when you finally cracked from the pressure, they called you resilient, unaware that your resilience was often just silent suffering. But now, something in you is quietly rebelling. A question rises. What if I'm still worthy when I do nothing? What if I'm allowed to rest, not as a reward, but a right? Because you're not a machine. You've been living inside a system that treats people like algorithms, optimizing for output, measuring every aspect of life. Even self-care became performance. Healing turned into another task. Everything folded into productivity until you forgot who you were outside the metrics. But let me remind you, you are not your GPA. You are not your revenue chart, your inbox, your weekly planner. You are not the number of things you checked off today. You are a human being, not a human doing. Like the trees that lose their leaves, the tides that rise and fall, or the moon that waxes and wanes, you too are allowed to have seasons. Growth and movement, rest and retreat. Pulling back isn't failure, it's rhythm. Stillness isn't regression, it's restoration. Healing often doesn't look like progress. It looks like sleeping more, saying no, crying unexpectedly, canceling plans without apology, doing less, and trusting that less is enough. And yes, that stillness may feel like emptiness. Without the noise of achievement, there's no applause, no performance, no gold star, only silence. But that silence, it isn't void, it's space, the kind of space where your real self begins to surface. Not the one who's always busy, but the one who breathes, the one who asks, how do I feel, instead of what do I have to do? The one who lets the dishes sit, who chooses softness over hustle, who stops apologizing for needing rest. You don't have to earn it. You don't need to explain. So, if you're not your grades, not your job title, not the list of achievements or the praise you once chased, then who are you? It's a simple question, but for someone who built their identity around being impressive, it can feel like standing at the edge of a cliff with no ground beneath. Letting go of that identity isn't freeing at first, it's terrifying. You were the overachiever, the reliable one, the person who delivered, excelled, and stood out. And that identity worked, because the world rewards output, not introspection. It praises progress, not presence. So you performed, you succeeded, you kept moving. But what happens when the applause fades, when no one's watching, when the roles fall away? You're left with silence. A silence that doesn't hurt, it just feels foreign. There's no scoreboard, no validation, just you, without a title to hide behind. And that's when the real work begins. Because maybe the self you've been trying to become, the admirable one, the one who proves your worth, was never the real you. Maybe that self was a carefully built costume, stitched from expectations, pressure, and survival. What if you don't need to be exceptional to be enough? What if belonging isn't earned by achievement? What if your value was never missing in the first place? This shift from chasing identity to uncovering essence is slow, quiet, sacred. It won't make headlines, it won't impress anyone, but it changes everything. It looks like unlearning, like choosing rest over productivity, even when guilt whispers you're falling behind, like letting go of being the best and learning to just be. It looks like waking up and saying, I don't have to impress anyone today, not even myself. That isn't giving up, that isn't stagnation, that's a quiet rebirth. And it doesn't happen in grand cinematic moments, it happens in the ordinary, in the way you show up with less armor, in the way you give yourself permission to not have all the answers, in how you begin seeing yourself not through the lens of usefulness, but with gentle, honest eyes. And when you do, you start to notice you are still valuable. Not because of your output, but because you exist. You are still worthy. Not someday when you're better, but now, even in this messy, uncertain middle, even without the trophies, even without the admiration. You are still you. And that quiet, ordinary, honest version of you, the one underneath the hustle, is the one who deserves to stay. You don't need to chase greatness to matter. You don't need to be extraordinary to be real. You were never broken, only buried beneath pressure, performance, and the need to be someone. And now, slowly, you're peeling back those layers, not to become someone new, but to meet the self who's always been there. When you can sit with that self, not to fix or improve, but simply to be, that is not failure. That is becoming. The world might not notice. There won't be applause, but your body will breathe easier. Your soul will soften, and something deep within, something that has waited so long, will finally whisper, you are enough, just as you are, even here, even now. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need to reinvent yourself or force your way toward becoming some ideal best self. You don't need a bullet journal, a productivity hack, or the perfect playlist to reset your life. You just need to begin again. And more than anything, you need to begin again gently. No leaps, no pressure to soar, just a quiet return to the present, one breath, one honest choice at a time. That return often starts with a simple question. Not the kind that seeks to fix things, but one that gently invites you back to yourself. What feels real right now? Not what will look good, not what might earn praise, just what feels kind, what feels honest. Maybe that looks like stepping outside without a reason. No destination, no podcast playing, just letting your eyes meet the sky. Or maybe it's opening a notebook and letting your thoughts spill out without structure, not for clarity, not for insight, but just so you don't have to carry them alone. Maybe it's making yourself something simple to eat and actually sitting with it, without rushing or multitasking. Maybe it's crying, not because everything is falling apart, but because you finally stopped holding yourself together so tightly. This is how we begin again. It doesn't look like a comeback. It doesn't need to be documented. It probably won't feel impressive at all. But something is shifting, because presence is replacing performance. Compassion is replacing control. And in that shift, you start to rewrite the story that said you had to earn your worth every single day. You begin to heal the old belief that told you love was something you had to deserve. For so long, you measured your life by movement, degrees, titles, milestones. But maybe now, life can be measured differently. Not in how much you've done, but in how deeply you've arrived. Maybe the real victories are the ones no one sees. The moment you wake up and choose not to punish yourself for being tired. The moment you catch yourself spiraling and just for once, choose to pause. The moment you say something kind to yourself, even if your voice trembles while saying it. These moments don't look like progress. They don't come with applause. But they're real, and they matter. Healing was never meant to be linear. It's not efficient, or glamorous, or quick. But it is sacred. Every quiet act of gentleness, every time you choose rest, softness, breath, it becomes a quiet defiance, a rebellion against the noise that told you you were only valuable when producing, when pushing, when proving. Beginning again is not about becoming someone better. It's not about fixing who you were or building a shinier version of yourself. It's about returning to the version of you that's been waiting, the one beneath the pressure, the one beneath the performance, the one who knows how to rest, who knows how to feel, who knows how to exist without apology, without productivity, without a reason. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to have a story to justify why you're starting again. You don't even need to believe it will all work out. You just need to come home. Come home to the part of you that got left behind while you were chasing approval. Come home to the part that never needed fixing. Come home to that still, quiet voice inside, the one that has been whispering again and again, it's okay to start small. It's okay to not have a plan. It's okay to begin. Right here, just like this. Because beginning again isn't a strategy, it's a remembering. And the path forward doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be certain.
So what comes after the burnout?
After the collapse that left you hollow. After the silence so long you began to forget what your own voice sounded like. What happens when you stop chasing approval and start learning how to breathe again? At first, it feels strange. There's no checklist, no performance reviews, no deadlines to wrap your identity around. And without all that structure, there's just space. Quiet, open space. At first, that silence feels like free fall, like you're slipping out of something solid. Because when you've built your sense of self around doing, the absence of doing can feel like erasure, like vanishing. But slowly, something softer starts to emerge, not with noise or urgency, but in quiet, ordinary moments. You begin to notice the world again, not the one you raced through on autopilot, but the one that's always been waiting. The way the morning light lands on your face when you open the window. The way your body relaxes when you rest, not as a reward, but as a right. The way a breeze feels when you finally slow down long enough to feel it. You start reclaiming joy in its simplest form. Reading a book, not to learn, not to post, but just because it makes you feel still inside. Going on a walk, without headphones, without a goal, just to listen to your breath and footsteps. Laughing, not because you're trying to please or deflect, but because something inside you finally feels light again. You begin returning to forgotten parts of yourself. The version that existed before the striving. The one who sketched just for fun. The one who loved stargazing before someone asked, "What can you do with that?" The one who was curious, soft, whole. And maybe you'll find yourself doing very little, at least by the world's standards. There might be entire days where you're not productive at all. And yet, you feel grounded. Not because of anything you achieved, but simply because you're here, alive, present, breathing. You may even hear echoes of your past in others, stories that sound like your own, like the woman who once led a high-powered career, burned herself out chasing success, and walked away from it all without a dramatic farewell. No updates, no reinvention, just 6 months of silence. Walking through the woods, reading books she forgot she loved, cooking slow meals. She didn't return to the life she left. Instead, she opened a quiet bookstore by the sea. She earns less, she's less impressive. But for the first time, she's not performing, she's just living. And that's what comes after healing. Not a comeback, not a reinvention, not a more polished version of your former self to present to the world, but a deeper life, a quieter one with space to exhale, to feel, to exist without the constant need to prove. Maybe one day someone will say to you, "You used to be so driven, so promising," and you'll smile, not because they're wrong, but because you've discovered something even more lasting than promise. And you'll say, "I still am, just not in the way you think. I'm here. I'm real. I'm finally alive in my own skin. And that's enough." This isn't the end of your story. It isn't the grand finale. It's a quiet chapter that may go unnoticed by the world, but changes everything inside you. Because what comes after healing isn't louder success, it's peace, and peace always is never loud. If something in this spoke to you, not loudly, but quietly, like a part of yourself you almost forgot, know this: you're not alone. This space was made for you, for anyone who once moved too fast, tried too hard, gave too much, for those who shined so brightly they burned out and are now learning how to soften, how to rest, how to come home to themselves. You don't have to be fixed. You don't need to be on track. You're allowed to be in the middle of it, tender, messy, and becoming. If you're rebuilding gently, without a map or deadline, I invite you to stay. Stay with this space. Stay with yourself. Stay with the quiet voice inside you that's learning how to speak again. And if this spoke to someone you love, send it their way. Sometimes healing begins with hearing the right words at the right time. You can also support this space by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss future reflections like this one. Not because you need more content to consume, but because every now and then a reminder might arrive exactly when you need it. Let's keep walking, not to chase perfection, but to return to presence, to live softer, slower, truer. Your worth isn't behind you. It's here, in every breath you choose to take forward. And I hope you keep taking them.